Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 872 of the Juicebox Podcast. Today, I'll be speaking with Jim. He's had type 1 diabetes for 55 years, and I think what I want to tell you about this episode is that a number of times, Jim really surprised me. You're never going to go wrong with that. While you're listening, please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. If you would like to save 35% on your entire order at CozyEarth.com, all you need to do is use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. It is that simple. Don't forget to go to t1dexchange.org/juicebox and take the survey. Completing the survey helps type 1 diabetes research. It helps you, and it supports the podcast. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Go complete the survey. And if you're looking for community around type 1 diabetes, look no further than the Juicebox Podcast private Facebook group. Juicebox Podcast, type 1 diabetes. What did you do first thing this morning? The first thing I did was drink my AG1 from Athletic Greens. AG1 is available at athleticgreens.com/juicebox. And when you use my offer code, you're also going to get 5 free travel packs and a year's supply of vitamin D. Thank you, AG1, for sponsoring this episode. Today's podcast is sponsored by Touched by Type 1. Now, Touched by Type 1 is out there doing the good work. touchedbytype1.org, helping people with type 1 diabetes through their organization of just lovely people. It's wonderful. You have to go look at it. touchedbytype1.org, and, of course, find them on Facebook and Instagram. I'll be speaking at their next event, so I hope I see you there.
My name is Jim. I live in northern Georgia. I'm a retired rubber chemist. I'm a musician and a car guy. I have 3 children and 7 grandchildren. I'm 69 years old, and I've had type 1 diabetes for 55 years, but it does not slow me down.
Jim, you were right. You have a longer intro because I think you have a longer, richer life than some of the people who come on at a younger age. And you make condoms back when you were working. Is that right?
Well, not that kind of rubber factory.
I'm just teasing you.
It was mostly automotive parts.
Okay. All right. Well, then there's a ton to pick through here, isn't there?
Sure.
55. You were 14 when you were diagnosed?
I was actually 13. I was diagnosed in January of 67, and I turned 14 that March.
Okay. 67.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to get to that for certain. Of your children, anybody have autoimmune?
No one. Of course, I have 4 of my grandchildren are under 4 years old, so it may be kind of early to tell. But so far, nothing.
Nobody's being tested for markers or anything like that?
No, I haven't. I think I'm going to just let them know they can do that if they want to. Mm-hmm. But no one else in my family either. None of my parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins, nobody.
How about in your family line, other stuff like celiac or, I don't know, Hashimoto's, anything like that?
No. My mother died of leukemia in 1959, and my parents died 10 to 15 years ago, but no autoimmune stuff that I was aware of.
Jim, you lost your mom when you were 4?
I was 6. It was 1959.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, that's something else.
Yeah, it was, and it never really, I've never really had huge effects from anyone close to me dying, except for my brother. He died maybe 4 years ago, and he was I'm not sure what his actual diagnosis was. He was, from what anyone could tell, he was severely autistic. He was non-communicative. He never spoke. And he got sick and ended up in the hospital on life support. And my parents being dead, I was left with the decision to basically unplug the machines. That was rough.
Yeah. Younger brother, older brother?
He was 2 years older than me.
Okay. And it's interesting because I guess of when he was born, like, do you think he ever had like an autism diagnosis, or was that not something they did then?
Yeah, I don't know that they really knew much about it until many years later. I think the first diagnosis was probably something like brain damage.
Right. Oh,
so,
did he?
But as far as I know, he was like that from birth. So,
did he live with your parents or in a facility?
He off and on. He lived with us at times, probably until I was 10, because my dad remarried, and my stepmom just wasn't. She was kind of high strung. Loved her dearly, and we had a great relationship, but she just wasn't equipped to deal with my brother. Mm-hmm. So he was in a facility after that.
Gotcha. There are days, Jim, when I'm high strung. I just wish people use the term still.
Yeah, I'm typically not. I'm pretty laid back.
Now, I can tell from your speech pattern that you're fairly laid back.
Yeah. So.
All right, so I'm going to pick through the rest of it a little bit. You play music?
Yeah, I started playing piano when I was probably 5 years old. We had an old piano down in the basement, and I would go down and play songs. I mean, not just plinking around, but actually with chords. And when I was 8, my dad said, if you take piano lessons for a year, I'll buy you a new piano. So he went out and bought the piano, and I took private lessons for probably 10 years. And then I went to Michigan State University as a piano major. And unfortunately, that was the year that Michigan lowered the drinking age to 18. And my music major and my college career didn't pan out too well.
I was going to say, Jim, did Meisterbrow waylay your music career?
No, I think it was Old Milwaukee.
Because, it's funny, as you're telling the story, I'm like, here he goes, he's off to college for his music major, but he's a chemist, I think, and that doesn't, none of that makes sense. So what, did you wake up and reorient yourself?
Well, I think I still planned on going back. Probably not to Michigan State because they weren't too happy with me. But I took a summer job in a rubber factory. We were molding, like I said, automotive parts. Started off on the press line, actually doing manual labor, which was great for my diabetes because I was getting, strenuous exercise all day long. And I ended up staying there for 8 years. And then I went back to college and got a chemistry degree.
Wow. So something about the job made you want to do that?
It paid better and was a lot easier than being a music teacher.
Jim, I like the way you make all your decisions.
Yeah. It gets even better than that. I was at a company in Indiana. I grew up in Michigan, but we lived in Indiana for 20 years. And I was at another company, and I was always getting calls from headhunters. And this guy calls up and says, I've got a job for you in this town in Indiana. Well, this was in the late 80s when I got this call. Well, in 1978, I had gone to, this is Auburn, Indiana. And every Labor Day, they do the Auburn Court Duesenberg Festival, which is the cars that they made and sold back in the 30s. And so I get this call about this job, and the guy says it's in Auburn, Indiana. I said, oh, that's the place with the cars. That'd be a great job. And we went.
I swear, Jim, your episode is going to be called Path of Least Resistance, I think.
I know. Yeah. So I did mention I'm a car guy. So
what kind of cars do you enjoy?
Right now I'm into muscle cars. I have a 93 Mustang convertible. And then I also am working on my second 67 Pontiac GTO.
Do you renovate them yourself, or do you like to buy them ready to go?
No, I buy them as projects, and then I restore them.
Okay.
I told my wife, this is the last one I'm doing.
Did you tell her
I'm
that?
Getting too, I'm getting too old for this. Yeah.
Oh, it's the work that's too much.
It's the work, yeah.
Plus, as we know, you're not looking for a challenge.
No, not anymore.
It's funny you said you started to say I told my wife as I was getting ready to say, are you married?
Yeah, I've been married 41 years. We met at the first rubber factory I worked at, and there were people there who told her not to marry me because at the time I was, the quintessential hippie / bad boy, long hair and a beard, and little bit into drugs and alcohol. They just told her to stay away from me, and we've been married 41 years now.
Wow. What do you think did it? Why do you think she ignored them?
I think it was probably, I'm sure as it is in most cases, it's a physical attraction to begin with. And that was incredibly strong with us. But she was also a Christian. And I saw something in her that made her different from all the other girls. And once I found out what it was, I adopted that philosophy as well. And I think that's probably why we've been together for so long.
What was that thing?
Finding Jesus.
Yeah, that really appealed to you.
Well, it didn't at first, and it didn't. It wasn't like an overnight change. It's a long process, and I think it's a lifelong process. Mm-hmm. And we went through some difficult times, and I think it was the only thing that saved us. And I'm not a holy roller. I'm not really outspoken about it, but if someone brings up the topic, I'm not afraid to discuss it.
No, I mean, it's not why you're on, but I'm just following the thread of the conversation. So were you looking for some constant in your life that you didn't have, or what do you think it gave you? One of the first things I do every morning is take AG1 from Athletic Greens. You could do this as well. You could build a foundation for better health with AG1. Use my link, athleticgreens.com/juicebox to get started today. When you do, you'll also unlock an offer to receive a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs. That's on top of your AG1. Come on. AG1 supports immunity, boosts energy, helps recovery, and promotes gut health. I take it because I'm afraid that my diet doesn't quite include all of the vitamins and nutrients that it should, and AG1 helps me to feel better every day. I tried a handful of other green drinks before coming to AG1. One of them, I won't mention the name, tasted like what I imagined feet would taste like if you made it into a drink. AG1, however, goes down nice and easy, and my palate is hard to get along with, so that really is saying something. AG1 from Athletic Greens contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals or artificial anythings. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just 1 scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills or supplements to look out for your health. Of course, to make it easier, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do to get that offer is visit my link, athleticgreens.com/juicebox. Once again, athleticgreens.com/juicebox. Links in the show notes. Links at juiceboxpodcast.com to AG1 and all of the sponsors. The next time you're staring at your phone and you want to interact with it very badly, but you don't know what to do, don't forget to check out touchedbytype1.org. I'm just kidding. You don't just hold your phone for no reason and think to yourself, what should I do next? Maybe I'll take a survey. Could I take the T1D exchange survey? No, I won't do that. I'll leave that for later. Scott's only asked me about that 8,000 times. I'll wait for 8,000 more, and then I'll go to T1DExchange.org/juicebox. Maybe just a BuzzFeed quiz. Yes, that's it. I want to find out which Tea Party guest I am.
It gave me peace and purpose, which I didn't have before.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I guess the peace at that, that was a pretty, that time in my life, let's see, we're going back to like 78, 79. I had been married before, got divorced. Well, we had a child and then we got divorced. And I was kind of floating around, wasn't quite sure where I was going to go. Played in a couple of bands, and we hit it off. And I think it was probably more than anything, I may not have realized it at the time, but I think it was just my body or something was telling me, dude, it's time to settle down.
Jim, in that time period, when you talk about drugs, you talking about acid?
No, I never did acid. It was mostly just marijuana.
Okay.
I did some cocaine, which it never really did anything for me. It was not a huge, I only did it like 2 or 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly just marijuana.
Okay. All right. So you have a previous marriage, but when you were very young, you weren't married very long.
Yeah, we got married when I was 22, and we were only married, we were married from 73 to, I guess our divorce was final in 79.
And one child, are you in touch with that child?
Oh, yeah. We're still very close. He has 3. I had 3 sons. He has 3 sons. And there's a huge story behind that because my dad had 2 sons. And like I said, I had 3 sons. My oldest son has 3 sons. My middle son had a son. So in our family, for 93 years, we had not had a girl born. And my youngest son in 2018 had the first girl in our family in 93 years.
That's crazy.
And then the next 2 kids were girls.
Maybe for the next 90 some years, it'll just go that way.
Yeah, could be. But I tell people we didn't have any girls in our family for 100 years.
Yeah.
And my wife says, yeah, but you hardly had any people at all.
We realized recently that that my parents' bloodline ends now pretty much because I'm adopted. So even though I have a son, the name moves forward, but not any connection to the family.
Right.
And then my brother has a daughter, and my other brother's children are his wife's, their stepkids. So, and I don't think they're going to have more. And I was like, wow, that's just sort of it. And then it's funny, it felt like a big deal for a second. And then I was like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, there's so many boys, I don't have to worry about our family name.
No kidding. You people are going to take over. Well, listen, Jim,
Yeah.
hopefully not, but it's possible in the coming decades, you're going to be this family's going to be responsible for an army of type 1 kids at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hope not, but
No,
you never know.
yeah. I mean, and if you're saying you go back that far and you can't find any autoimmune, you really become an outlier in that situation.
Yeah, I definitely am.
How do you figure out in the 1960s and the 1970s, in the middle of, free love and everything else, and no real diabetes technology, how do you figure out how to take care of yourself? Like you're healthy now, is that correct?
Oh yeah, yeah, no complications of any kind. I I think it was just getting into a routine and doing what you need to do. Unfortunately, I'm guessing it was probably not until sometime in the mid 80s that I had kind of settled down and gotten into, not eating as many things as I shouldn't have. And I'm thankful that after having this disease for 55 years, I've got no retinopathy, no neuropathy. The only other autoimmune I have is hypothyroid. So,
Jim, it's almost ridiculous. I mean,
I know,
I'm thrilled for
I
you.
know.
I'm thrilled for you, but it's almost just silly what you're saying. So you managed for like around 20 years, not really paying very close attention to things. So what insulin are you using in the beginning?
In the beginning, it was 45 units of Lente every day, one shot in the morning. That was it.
That's all you did. Did you get low
Yeah.
ever?
Very rarely. I only actually remember, I remember one day at work, this was probably in the late 70s, early 80s. I was at work and I was I was filing some papers and I was putting them in folders in alphabetical order, and I couldn't do it. It was just, it's like I couldn't tell, I had this thing with an A on it and I just couldn't figure out that it went in the A folder. And this thing with the C on it went in the C folder. And my boss comes in and he knew something was up. So he calls my wife and he says, just get him a Coke. He'll be fine. So.
But nothing. Wow. I mean, how do you, what's my question even? Do you think you just got lucky?
Well, I don't believe in fate and luck and stuff like that, but yeah, I can't explain it. Now I know that my stepmom, who I never called my stepmom, she was my mom. Mm-hmm. She was great. We had a great relationship. She listened to what the doctor was saying mostly about the diet. And back then it was the exchange diet. I think I was on 2,700 calories a day. So it was like, this many starches and this many fruits and this many vegetables and stuff like that. And she was good at sticking to that. And I think that would have had a better effect had I not been going off the deep end with, fruit pies and milkshakes and stuff like that.
So the diet really only existed in the home.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, it was to the point where at night I'd be practicing my clarinet in my bedroom and I thought I could smell ammonia. And I finally realized years later that I was probably smelling the ketones oozing out of my pores.
Jim, that's not a euphemism. You played the clarinet?
Yeah, I played, in addition to piano, I started playing clarinet in 6th grade, bassoon in, 8th grade, saxophone in 9th grade, And I think that's about it. I mean, I dabbled around on guitar and stuff like that, but never. It was mostly piano and wind instruments. And I currently play in the church orchestra, and I also belong to a local community band.
Is it just come naturally to you, the music?
Yeah, yeah. It's I know that it's in anyone who's a successful musician, it's just a characteristic they've probably had from birth. And oddly enough, I think it's also accompanied by a very strong math skills.
Really?
Believe it or not, because music is very precise and rhythmic, and you have long notes and short notes, and they're all mathematically related.
Well, that's
so I think you'll find that a lot of mathematicians and scientists are also musicians.
And so that's, I guess, when you went back to college, that made all that easy as well.
Yeah. It would have, except for the drinking age.
I meant the second time, Jim. When you
oh, the second time, yeah.
No, okay. The first time nothing helped you. You were
right.
It sounds like you almost got tossed out of there on your ass, actually.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
So, what did your tell me again? What your degree ended up being in?
I got an associate's degree in chemistry.
Okay, and that propelled you through an entire career.
It actually, let's see, I took the first job in 1972. I got my degree I didn't get my degree until 1996. And then I retired 3 years ago in 2019. So I was in the industry for 46 years.
Is that going from how you were growing up until you started this career, you met your wife there, so she didn't draw you to the place. You don't seem like the story doesn't propel itself towards, I'm going to get like a regular job and work at a rubber plant and, make dashboards.
Yeah. Well, a friend of mine told me about this place, and I was looking for a summer job. So I went there and got in, and it just took off from there. I started off on the production line. Apparently the foreman noticed that I had more skills than just manual labor. So I ended up in the laboratory as the lab technician, and then ended up kind of just growing into even though I had no degree, I was basically the chemist for the organization. So,
boy, that's a story that won't exist anymore, huh?
Yeah.
You kind of bounce around as a younger person, and then get a job, and just based off of hard work and your intuition for the job, you moved up and raised a family and 3 kids off of an associate's degree.
Yeah.
And in your retirement, you have cars and free time and leisure and music, and even playing music's not a cheap endeavor. So you, through the years, were buying instruments, and I'm imagining everything else. Yeah, that's that might be a time we all find ourselves missing at some point.
Yeah, I don't think it's like that anymore. So
no, my son left college, and the pressure to like find a job that paid well it felt like it started as they handed in the diploma,
Yeah. And I've told young people over the years that going to college and picking a degree without knowing whether it's something you really like to do,
it's dangerous.
Is a huge mistake.
Yeah.
I've often told people, go out and work a bunch of places and figure out what it is you like, and then decide what kind of degree you want.
Jim, a coffee's $8. How are they supposed to do that? They gotta get a job. I agree with you though. I felt like in the first 18 years of my first child's life, one of the strangest things I saw happen was him go to college and be like, this is what I'm going to get a degree in, when he didn't know which way was up or what he cared about or anything like that. He knew what he was good at, but he doesn't know what he likes, or if he likes anything, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And my youngest son did it right. He he was always interested in mechanical stuff. He and I worked on the cars together, and he said, I'm not going to college. And he picked out a trade school in Chicago, and now he is an ASE certified master mechanic with Land Rover.
Okay. Well, that's a nice clean job nowadays, being a mechanic.
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah.
You know.
Little rolling computers that
Yeah. So he is currently restoring my first 67 GTO.
Oh, he's doing it for you.
Yeah. Well, he's doing that one, and I'm working on the second one.
Okay.
And it's funny because my granddaughter, she calls me Pop Pop. And every time we talk about my son's GTO, she says, it's Pop Pop's GTO.
Jim, all is left in the next however long we talk for is for you to say bang so I can call this episode Pop Pop Bang. Because right now I'm stuck on Jim makes rubbers and you know, stuff like that, which I don't think is appropriate for our conversation.
Yeah. Jim met his wife in a rubber factory.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
With all that rubber around, I don't know how you had all those kids. It's crazy.
Well, I guess the one related to diabetes, the one bang I've had in my life is CGM. I mean, I'm sure other people have told you their stories. You know, I was drinking all the time, peeing all the time, losing weight, blah, blah, blah. You know, I had to do the urine tests, blah, blah, blah. There is kind of a funny story on how I got to pump therapy. I've been on pumps for 16 years now.
16 years. Okay.
I was back in 2007. I don't know if they still even have these, but you had health savings accounts or healthcare spending account, I think is what it was.
I used mine yesterday. They definitely have them still. Well,
there was a different one that we had because there's two choices now. Back in that day, if you had any money left in it at the end of the year, it was gone.
Right.
You didn't get it. So I'm looking at I kept pretty good track of it in a spreadsheet, and I'm looking at it going, oh, geez, I've got $1,000 left. If I don't use that, I'm going to lose it. I think I'll go on an insulin pump. So I went to talk to my endo, and he says, yeah, I think, because a previous endo had told me that my control was so good. He says, if you want to go on a pump, fine, but you're on MDI, you really don't. It's not going to make any difference. And it hasn't as far as my, A1Cs or anything like that. But I think it has helped. And then when CGM came out, that was, like I said, that was a game changer.
So tell me a little bit about, you were on MDI for how long?
Let's see. I was on the single injection probably until the late 80s. So 20 years.
Wow. Right.
And then in that 89, 90 range was when the human insulins were coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And my endo switched me from the single shot to, I think it was NPH in the morning and evening. And then at that time it was Humalog or Humulin and Humulin R.
Right. At meals.
With meals. Yeah. And then when Humalog came out, it was pretty much the same routine, NPH in the morning and evening and Humalog with meals. When do you switch to
a basal insulin?
My first pump was in 2007. And it was a Medtronic 513G. And that was a good run, I thought. I mean, my A1Cs were always in the high fives and low sixes.
Mm-hmm.
But a couple of months ago, I pulled up some glucometer data. And in 2000, and this is on MDI, my average blood glucose was 150, but I was running 32% under 70 and 32% over 180 and only 30% in range.
Yeah. Well, there's
Even
no,
though,
I'm sorry.
so as you know, there's a fallacy to just looking at the A1C.
Right. Yeah, you didn't have any kind of stability. So you were low for a long periods of time, high for long periods of time, 150, and the average gave you an A1C that seemed amazing, but probably wasn't
Right.
as good as it
Yeah.
looked. Yeah.
And I think due to running low so much, it didn't take that long to develop hypo-unawareness, which I still have to this day.
How low do you get before you know you are?
Um, I'll get down to 37 and I'll fall down. That's the only way I know. I don't feel a thing.
Wow.
So then in 2017, I pulled up some more numbers and things were better. Average is 121. I was only running 19% low and 68% in range. So that was, halfway decent without having a CGM. The other stat on my first ones, my standard deviation was 87.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2017, it dropped to 50. And then the last 90 days, average is a little higher, 136, but my standard deviation was 43, only 3% low, 10% high, and 84% in range.
Wow.
And this is the last 90 days. We've been traveling a lot. I would typically run 85 to 90% time in range. But like I said, we've been traveling and that just kind of, I'm able to manage fairly well with it, but you still get highs more than I like.
Restaurant after restaurant, sitting, and are you driving around right now or flying?
Well, it's a combination depending on, we've got kids. My middle son and his wife and two kids are in California. My youngest son's in Illinois and my oldest son's in Michigan. So we just flew back yesterday from Michigan. So,
wow. Well, thank you. Actually, today's my birthday.
Is it? Happy birthday.
Thank you very much. I only bring that up because people end up on the show all the time on their birthday and they bring it up. And I was like, I have to say when it's mine, right? So when you went to a CGM was when?
Let's see. I went on the G5 and the Tandem T-Slim in 2019, the year I retired, because I guess my I have recall issues. My other pump,
the Medtronic.
Yeah, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The warranty expired in 2019, which was perfect timing. I did a lot of research looking at pumps and decided I wanted the T-Slim, even though I could only get the G5 on Medicare at that time. The advantage to that was I had it all dialed in before I went on the G6 and Control IQ in 2020. So I had basically done all my basal testing and everything ahead of time. Mm-hmm. And I frequently recommend to people on the Facebook pages, they're to go on Control IQ. Do you have any advice for me? And my advice is always get it dialed in before you turn Control IQ on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, run it like a regular pump.
Yep.
Yeah, it's tough because some people are hoping that algorithm is going to save them from something they haven't been able to figure out so far. Mm-hmm. I wondered. Well, go ahead, but I have a question.
The problem I see with that is it's kind of like driving a car that you have an erratic speedometer.
Yeah.
It reads high, so you're compensating for that. Well, then the next day it reads low, so you're compensating for that. Well, your pump is compensating for things that are happening because your settings aren't right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's everything is settings, Jim. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say that forever. So,
sure.
What was my question? Oh, was it a huge shift going to a CGM and a pump versus just a pump versus just MDI? Like, was there ever a spot where you thought, I can't I can't adapt to this, or have you always been interested in moving forward with things?
No, I've always been a technology addict. So,
Okay. So,
um, and I guess that's one thing that I'm typically not a compassionate person, but I do feel for the people who um, just don't have strong math and scientific skills. I mean, let's face it, not everyone's a mathematician. And I can't imagine being diagnosed today and the doctor saying, here's a pump and here's CGM, go for it. It would have to be so overwhelming.
yeah. Don't you think that that's part of what we're seeing with like Omnipod 5, Control IQ, that kind of thing? Doesn't it seem like they're trying to develop something that if you don't know much about it, you can still have more stability at a lower number than you're going to achieve on your own?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it does seem to me like what they're trying for. Because I get lost sometimes in the podcast too, where I'm very accustomed to being around people who are super motivated and either get it right away, or if they don't get it, really nose to the grindstone, find a way to figure it out. Whereas I believe that it's possible that the great majority of the rest of the people don't fall into those categories, and they might just be bouncing around their whole life and not knowing.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think you see it in the Facebook posts. You know, people just, I've had this disease for so many years and I just can't control it. And I do feel for those people.
For the first time in forever, I mean, honestly, I've been doing this a really long time. No one's ever yelled at me. I got yelled at the other night
Really?
in a Facebook post I saw what was happening. So I didn't find it to be off-putting, but here's what this person probably meant. It's not what they said. I think what they meant was, I can't figure this out. I need you to tell me. And I, of course, was trying to help them figure it out. And they just kind of, I don't even know how to put what happened. They just sort of, we were in the middle of talking about something. They just turned on me. And, you're not helpful. This isn't helpful. Like, blah, blah. I was trying to ask leading questions. I thought we were having a dialogue. I didn't realize that I was speaking with a person who probably was at wit's end.
Yeah.
And feeling a ton of pressure. It was about a child. It was about a younger child. Like, I completely understood. And I tried really hard to like say, hey, listen, I think we're just having a communication problem here. But the truth is, from my perspective, what was happening was they couldn't take it anymore. They were up to like, somebody needs to tell me what to do because I don't know what to do. And that I think is your point, is that those people are, they're plentiful, and it's a shame, Hey, you just said something strange. You threw me off. You're not normally compassionate?
Well, yeah, like I mentioned earlier, when my mother died and my dad died and my stepmother died, I wasn't hugely affected. Now, my mom, I think I was more affected by her than my actual biological mother, because, I mean, let's face it, I was only 6 years old.
Yeah, it's pretty young.
But when my mom died, she had been an executive secretary at Ford. Both her and my dad worked at Ford, and they met after my mother died. And she contracted Alzheimer's. And having known that she was an executive secretary at Ford Motor Company, she was a gourmet cook. She worked in offices. She was smart, and to see her reduced to what she was, before she died was hard. It was actually, seeing her deteriorate was harder on me than her death was, because I think by the time she died, she was done with it finally.
Do you feel like you've like walled yourself off from those feelings?
Yeah, I don't know. I've never put any. I've never tried to do any, soul searching about it, or never seen a psychiatrist or anything like that.
Yeah,
But
you're from the wrong generation for that question. I just thought I would ask it anyway. No, Scott, I got up the next day and I paid my bills.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Well,
no, but it's interesting. Hey, listen, you don't lean in that direction, but I'm still going to ask the question because of your older brother. Do you have any like tendencies towards spectrum stuff? Like
I'm not sure what you mean.
autism spectrum stuff, or like, do you have any
Oh,
leanings that way?
uh, I suppose in a minor sense, because as a child, I was perfectly content playing by myself. I mean, I had a lot of friends, and I was popular in school. But when I was younger, I could sit in the basement hours for hours by myself playing with my Legos and stuff like that. I didn't need anyone, but I wasn't, uh, I like I said, I had friends. We played, we did stuff. So I suppose, I've always been kind of a loner,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, you get a party going, and I can be the life of the party.
Yeah, I took that from the beginning of your story. Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I'm kind of schizophrenic.
Jim, I think you're one joint away from just going crazy right now.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Hey,
it's not legal down here, so
oh, okay. I was going to ask you if you still partake once in a while.
I did at one of my kids' bachelor parties, and it slipped out. My wife heard about it, and she was not too happy with me.
I didn't think she did. I was just checking on you.
No, she doesn't. No, didn't.
Oh,
So,
that's pretty interesting. What
yeah.
else do I have here for you? I did want to ask about your wife. I wanted to ask if she has any involvement with your diabetes at all.
Very little actually. I mean, I've been self-managed for so long. She knows that I know how to take care of it. Um, she can tell when I'm low. Well, she used to be able to tell when I'm low, but I have my low limit on my Dexcom set, or not on the Dexcom, but on my pump. I've got my low limit set at 100,
Mm-hmm.
so I get advance warning when I start to go low. And she's pretty hands off, but she's aware of it. So,
Is that a number that has increased as you've gotten older, or has that always been where you like to treat?
well, yeah, that's a tough one, because I don't think it was until I got the CGM in 2019 that I really knew where I was, because, like I said, I had developed hypo unawareness so long ago that like I said, I was out mowing the yard one day, and literally my legs went out from under me.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to make my way into the house, and I checked on my glucometer. I was 37. And that happened at work once too. My legs went out from under me, and it was exactly 37. So I know that if I fall down, I'm at 37.
You don't have to test anymore. You're good. And has that happened since you've had a CGM?
No, it has not.
Yeah,
No.
that's a big change.
I mean, I've had lows, but because a lot of times when I'm working on the car, it's physical labor turning wrenches, and I'll frequently turn my basal completely off when I go downstairs to work on the car, and then I have to set an alarm to make sure I turn it back on later in the day.
Yeah. They say, Jim, temp basal off is the way to go, so you can't forget to put it back on. Avoid your DKA that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't been in DKA since, I think the last one I had was in 19. I'm assuming it's going to be 1981 based on the house I was living in. And I didn't even go to the hospital for that. I knew what was going on. I went to the pharmacy, got a bottle of regular insulin, just, gave myself probably like 10 units or something like that. But I had been hospitalized for DKA 3 times from probably in the early 70s, I would say.
Yeah,
but none since then.
As you're hearkening back to earlier management ways that, and obviously you were doing what you were told. And I asked you earlier, you're healthy, right? You don't have anything. You said, no, I'm good. But then you said later you have brain fog. You have trouble recalling things sometimes.
Yeah, I just had my when you're on Medicare, they give you an annual. It's not a physical. Well, yeah, I guess it's a physical, but they also do a memory test, and I ace the memory test every time. But I told the doc, I said this, and this is my PCP, not my endo. He says, well, you don't have any memory issues. You have recall issues. He said, the data's there. You just can't find it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure what that means, but it's the worst with people's names. People I've known for 20 years, it'll take, and then their name will just come to me later on.
Looking at them in the face or thinking of them, whatever, you just can't find the name sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
Listen,
and he didn't seem concerned about it. So,
well, sure, it's not happening to him.
Yeah. Good one. I'll have to remember that.
Yeah. I've said it here before, so it's not that much of a secret, but I'm just good at moving. So whenever I can't find a word, I just find a different one. But it happens to me on the podcast constantly. I talk so quickly, you can't see it happening usually.
Yeah.
Or I find a way to like artfully pause while I collect myself. And if I really get caught, then, I'll just admit to it while I'm talking about it. I cannot think of what I was thinking of just now. I'm 51 today. So, I mean, that's not young. It's not old. And I've had problems with my iron being low in the past. So I'm not certain, because the iron thing just like, it knocks you out. Like it's like being on a dimmer switch and somebody just shutting you off.
Right.
So, but I know what you're talking about. I've had that experience. We all have. I've watched it happen to my wife recently as she's getting older and the kids are like, she can't think of her word. And I'm like, you only have like 25 years before this happens to you. So just be a little kind, Yeah. That's interesting. It really is.
Right.
Jimmy.
Yeah. And like I said, it's worst with names. That's the big thing. And I actually read somewhere, I saw it on the internet, so it has to be true, that there is actually a condition for this thing about not being able to remember people's names or recall their names.
Yeah. I'm terrible with names, but I always have been. And, so it's not because I don't care about people. I don't know. Like, I can't remember people's names. Like, tight in my life, I can, but you get slightly outside of my bubble and I'm like, I remember that part. Like, you start telling stories around them. Like you even said, like, I remember what house I was in, or like you can remember all that stuff and not the one piece. I have to tell you, I find talking to you incredibly interesting because your life goes against convention a little bit and, in a number of different ways. And it's interesting to look back at it as a whole. I find it super interesting to hear somebody talking about, like, I was married in my early 20s for a number of years and I have a child, but then, and I went to college once, but then I went back to get an associate's degree. I had this job here. I met a person at the job. It's very interesting to hear it all in one place. I don't know why exactly, other than I think most people expect, nowadays I'm going to grow up, I'm going to go to school, I'll meet a person, I'll marry that person. Everybody thinks that's going to last forever. We'll have a bunch of kids. Those kids will become astronauts and quarterbacks and the president. Well, I don't know how auspicious that is anymore, but like, and these big things. And it's just, I realized the other night I was taking out the trash, where I do a lot of my best thinking, walking to the end of the street. And, it's the only time I'm alone, like during the week. And I just thought, my expectations for things versus how they went, you really get a different perspective as you get older.
Sure. Yeah.
All the things you think in your 20s and 30s while you have a young family it's all hope. It's not based in much reality. And for the people who get to the end and it went exactly the way they thought it was going to go, I think that's a fluke, maybe more than anything else.
Yeah. And I mean, I think this is one of those things that kind of goes back to another era. My dad he was born in 1923. He was a bombardier on B-17s in World War II, got shot down on his second mission and spent 2 years in a German prisoner of war camp, came back to the U.S., went to college on the GI Bill, and became an engineer and finished out his career at Ford Motor Company. I mean, he had a plan and he stuck to it. People don't do that anymore. Yeah. I didn't even do it.
No, Jim, you blow in the wind like that thing at the car dealership.
Yeah, pretty much.
You're like weed, beer, piano, Jesus. I don't care. Put it in front of me. I'll follow it.
Yeah. I just go with the flow, You
really do.
But so
even with the diabetes, you didn't fight against the changes. You took the time to relearn. I'm a big fan of that. And, you could have got stuck somewhere and been like, screw it. I'm just going to do it like this.
Yeah. Well, talk about memory. One of the odd things, I think, because when I was diagnosed, it didn't, I was like, okay, I got to do this. Let's move on with life. I can still clearly remember the doctor coming into the examination room and telling me I had diabetes. I can picture it plain as day, almost like a motion picture. And what I find so odd about that is, why do I remember that? Because I don't remember it having much of an effect on me at all. A couple days later, I was in the hospital for a week while they got things straightened out, and that was it.
That was it. Just went and did what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. For all the changes, all the weird tracks I've taken in my life, I've always been kind of a compliant person, except my wife accuses me of being passive aggressive. So.
Yes, I'm sure you're terrible, Jim.
Yeah. Horrible person.
Yes. The way you've stayed there and raised 3 children for 41 years and stop smoking your weed when you were told to.
Yeah.
You just don't listen, Jim.
Yeah. No, poor listener. Yeah. But I've done a few other things in my life too. Let's see, in 1984, I hiked by myself into and out of the Grand Canyon, spent a week down in there. And that was when I was on the 1 shot a day, which I probably cut in half because of the
hiking
exertion. Yeah. But that was a fantastic trip. And in 2014, I had open heart surgery to fix my mitral valve, which I'd had a heart murmur since I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And the doctors always told me, you'll probably have to get that fixed someday. And when I went in for an echocardiogram every year, and I would always position myself so I could watch it on the screen, and I could see that, okay, this thing is not looking good now. And then about a month after that, I started getting short of breath and told my wife, okay, it's time. Told them at work, I said, I've got to go in for open heart surgery. So I'll be off for about a month, and survived that. And it really, looking back on it, it was pretty painful for a few days, but all in all, it's still holding in there. So that was 8 years ago.
Difficult recovery?
No, actually, the only thing that bothered me, and I don't recall what my blood sugars were doing at the time, so they probably weren't too bad. I was on the Medtronic pump at that time. They probably ran high for a while. I know they had me on an insulin drip in the hospital. I'm not sure how many units per hour I was getting, but it was probably a pretty hefty dose. Mm-hmm. The worst thing about it was I had to cough to make sure I was getting any junk out of my lungs. And that hurt.
And that hurt.
And I remember the first time I sneezed, I was convinced my chest was going to explode.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to break open, and my lungs were going to spray over here, and there was going to be blood all over the bathroom, but didn't happen.
Yeah.
I didn't know that I was wired shut, so I couldn't explode. So,
wow, that's really crazy. I'm feeling like there's a lot more that's happened to you that we're never going to get to.
Yeah, I guess that's all the major stuff. But I mean, the things, I've got a list here of everything I wanted to talk about.
How are we
I've got
doing?
one. We're almost done.
Cool. I'm doing all right.
Excellent. And I think we've mostly talked about it. The one section I have labeled what I don't have, and we already talked about most of that. Complications. I don't have any complications. I don't feel highs or lows. I don't have as many highs or lows, but I still hit that occasional 300 because I didn't bolus right for a meal, eating out or something like that. But I 300, 350, I don't feel a thing.
You just don't know. There's no difference for you.
Yeah, I feel perfectly fine. I have never felt, other than the initial lows that I felt very early on, I don't feel a thing. I don't feel sick. I mean, obviously when you're in DKA, you're, puking your guts out. But, and then the whole other thing about no one in my family with T1D is kind of weird.
Yeah. No, it is.
The other thing I have listed here is horror stories. And that's not for me, but for things I've heard and seen over the years. I remember being in my the endo's office, the one that got me started on the pump. And I got to say, he was the best endo I ever had because he was a type 1 on pump therapy. Mm-hmm. He understood. He knew what was going on. He's the only one I've ever had that really had an intimate knowledge of diabetes. But I was in his examination room one day, and the walls weren't very soundproof. And he was in the room next to me, and there was an older fellow who I assume was a type 2. He walks in and says, "Well, your A1C was 11." And the guy says, "Oh, is that bad?" And I'm like, "Oh, dude, you're killing yourself."
Yeah.
And I mean, I laughed at it I don't know that I laughed at it at the time because obviously it's not funny, but I had another endo tell me about a patient of his who was a young college-educated woman who simply refused to take care of her diabetes. She was in a wheelchair by the time she was in her mid-20s. And I'm just thinking, gosh, that's so sad, and me being a totally uncompassionate person, to feel for someone, I'm, but, and then this was, I think, in the early, probably the mid 80s, my wife and I were canoeing on a small river near where we lived, and a fella she worked with and her husband, or his wife, we ran into them on the river, not literally ran into him, but he was type 1 and he was having a low. And turns out that when he was diagnosed, his parents refused to admit that there was anything wrong with him because he looked fine. There's nothing wrong with him. He was already in his mid-20s suffering from retinopathy.
Oh,
but the worst one of all was a good friend of my wife. They were never married, but her boyfriend for years was a type 1. He had both legs amputated. He was pretty much blind. He went into kidney failure and he died. And all as a result of type 1. So, like I said, I don't particularly believe in luck or fate, but I guess I have to say I've been pretty lucky.
Yeah. No, I don't know another way to think about it. When the technology and the understanding is where it was in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and part of the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
to make it as far as you have, as well as you have, is, there's a little bit of, I mean, it doesn't matter what you call it, right? But whatever it is, it's there because, like you said, look at all the other stories you have, just from being in the office or meeting people,
Mm-hmm.
along the way. Was there any kind of community aspect to diabetes? So like the way you describe yourself, it's interesting to me that this podcast or that you're involved in the Facebook group because it doesn't seem like you would be, but you are.
Well, I think it was probably after I got on the CGM and the Tandem T-Slim and Control IQ. And probably it may have started when I was researching what pump I wanted to go on. I started looking up Facebook pages and found the Tandem T-Slim page. There was a group 30 years with type 1 diabetes, adults with T1D, and then I didn't see the Juicebox podcast until just probably within the last year. Someone on one of the pages mentioned, I listened to this podcast and it was really good. And I'm Juicebox, what the heck is that? So I looked it up and listened to a couple episodes, and then I saw the pro tips. So I listened to all of those, and then I've gone through the list. I haven't listened to all of them. I probably listened to maybe a third of them.
Wow.
And I usually go by the titles. Oh, this one looks interesting. But I have to admit, I've gotten some good tips. I think the best one was, it might have been one of the pro tips, was bump and nudge.
Yeah.
That was good. And then the other one about the CIQ Ninja, the guy whose son.
Yeah. Wasn't that great?
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah,
and this morning I just listened to the older lady who was diagnosed at like 49. I think it was number 714.
Stacy.
Scott
messed up. Yeah.
Scott messed up. Yeah. I enjoyed that one. I do like listening to other people and just hearing their experiences. But another weird thing about my experience with T1D is in 55 years, I have met so few people with type 1. I have never actually seen another person. I've never run into another person with an insulin pump.
Really?
In person. Yeah, ever.
But you
55 years.
But you did see a type 1 on a river once. That's got to count for like 15 different experiences.
Yeah, but my wife knew him and she told me he was diabetic. So,
all right.
And there were two guys that I worked with at the company I retired from. There were two guys who were T1Ds and they never talked about it. I never would have known it except for one of the guys saw my pump because he thought it was a pager.
Yeah.
And I said, no, it's an insulin pump. And it turns, so he and I hit it off pretty well. And I haven't heard from him for a while. I need to contact him.
But
he was on the one of the later Medtronic pumps with the Guardian sensor. I think the 617 or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know all those Medtronic pumps for sure.
So,
of which there are many. And so you like this. You like being around other people who have diabetes.
Yeah. I guess I've been on the Facebook pages for a few years, and I was giving a lot of advice to people who were newly diagnosed. They're having this issue with the pump, and I think I probably gave more advice than I got, but there were still some valuable things I picked up, and so I started my own Facebook page, because there was one out there with 30 years with type 1 diabetes. And I said, well, 30?
I got that
Let's
one.
go 50.
Yeah.
Let's go 50. So I started a Facebook page called 50 Years with Type 1 Diabetes. And it's interesting because I've got like 60, I haven't looked recently, but about at least 62 members the last time I looked. And I'm the only one that posts anything. I mean, I always get a lot of comments when I do post something, but no one volunteers anything. I think they're just like, yeah, I've had this for so long. It's just a way of life. I got nothing to post. So
Yeah, I also think that's a generational thing. I don't think people in their 60s are looking to generally speaking be part of the social media movement. And,
yeah,
for the
probably.
most part. It's hard to get people to share things. I have an incredibly tough time getting type 2s to share. So I try, and every once in a while you get one who's terrific, but it's not as many people as I hoped for.
Yeah.
Your group has 75 members in it right now, Jim.
Okay.
Very nice.
Cool.
That's excellent. 50 years with type 1 diabetes, and the 50 is 50. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Very nice. My group gets 300 new members a week.
Yeah.
And it's not something I expected, to be perfectly honest. Most of this is not something I expected. That someone would tell you that I listened to a podcast. It still freaks me out. Or when someone, when people come in, they answer a question about how did you find out? And I read through every one of them that pops up in front of me. And I'm just stunned, at how it's sort of permeated and spread. I just never, I hoped, but I didn't really expect it to. And,
sure. Yeah. Well, there are so many parents out there with children with T1D.
Yeah.
And that's another group that, I really feel for, because it's hard enough to manage this thing by yourself, but managing it for someone else, well,
yeah, it's hard
because of Arden, that's got to take a toll on you.
Yeah. My wife, she's pretty stoic most of the time about stuff like this. But the other day she said to me, we're getting older. We're not like, we're not drifting. It's not over or anything like that. But she said, I didn't think there'd be so many roadblocks. Mm-hmm. And I said, no, I didn't either. And it's tiring. And if you don't have the support you need from people, and you don't have the support you need financially and, health insurance wise, and your earlier point, if you just kind of don't have the wherewithal to think it through, and be ready to get it wrong and try again. And sometimes, talk like you're talking about, go with the flow. And sometimes, have to stand up and push back. It's more than you expect. You're in your 20s and your 30s and you're having kids, and you think like, here, this one's my astronaut, and this one's going to be a prince, and this one's going to be this. And you don't think that, 25 years later, you're still going to be on the internet trying to figure out why somebody's leg hurts, or, what, that kind of stuff. It's just, this autoimmune stuff it sucks.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's been a part of my life for so long that it's just there,
Well, listen, your early grooming was, I got captured by the Nazis, and here I am, I'm back. So I don't imagine there's a ton of giving up in you.
Yeah. Well, I guess that I probably inherited that from my dad.
Sure.
For him, spending 2 years in prison camp in World War II was, he said from one standpoint, it was the scariest time of his life, but it was also the most glamorous time of his life, because he was a hero back home, and he's a hero to me,
He knew that even when he was in the prisoner camp, he knew that it, like, the knowledge that he was there and not giving up was uplifting to other people.
Yeah, I think so.
Plus, how the hell do you complain, Jim? Like, right? Like, once, my tire's flat, and he's like, Nazis, leave me alone. Let me know when they lock you up in a prisoner of war camp, and until then, go clean your room. You're like, oh, all right, I guess he's got me.
Yeah, well, all that plus having grown up during the Depression,
Sure.
So he had been through it.
No kidding. How old was he when he passed?
He was 87.
That's a full life.
Yeah.
Well,
he got a full full honors military funeral. It was very moving. I almost tear up just thinking about it, because it's like, wow, 21 gun salute and everything.
Making you cry sounds difficult. So
well, not as difficult as it seems, because I cry more tears of joy than anything else. So.
Yeah. I had 20 minutes while I was by myself last night where I was doing laundry, and I found myself thinking of a memory of one of my kids, and I made myself cry by myself.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's
well, I mean, let's see, this would be my daughter-in-law's father does a church in his house. And we usually, when we're up there, if we're up there on a Sunday, we'll go, and it's very informal. And we were singing a couple of hymns, and one of them was talking about something about a newborn baby. And we had two that were due within weeks. And I just busted out in tears. It was crazy.
I think that's good for you, Jim. I really do. I found myself just thinking about, I mean, my son's 22. He's still here. He just finished college. And I keep thinking he's going to leave, and I don't know when it's going to be. And what am I going to say to him before he goes? And I realized that the thing I always really want to say to him in tough situations, I never say, because it's not valuable for him to hear when he's trying to make his way or be confident or things like that. You know what I mean? Like there's the part you say, and there's the part you don't say. And I thought, boy, before he leaves, like, how am I going to stop myself from saying, please don't go?
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't. I think I'm going to have to say it because I don't know how I'm going to hold it in. And, because all the other times, something tough happens to him and you want to be like, look, I know this sucks and everything, and you should give up, but you don't say that. You say, keep fighting. In your mind, you think, I don't think this is going to work out, but I think there's more value in him trying and failing than there is in him just walking away from it. He doesn't need to hear from me that this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
And, I don't know how I'm going to tell him, just, I'm going to miss you. It doesn't seem like enough. So,
yeah. Well,
anyway, that made me cry.
When my dad dropped me off at college, I basically got out of the car with my suitcases, and he said, bye.
Don't let Jerry get you, Jim.
Yeah, watch out for the Nazis.
Listen, if they throw those big grenades at you, you've got time to throw them back. Don't worry.
Yeah.
I got to go.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, that's interesting. Jim, you've had a hell of a life. I appreciate you sharing it with me very much.
Well, I appreciate talking to you about it. It was good.
No, it was, did you have a good time?
Yeah, it was fun.
Good. I'm glad. I really am. I don't want to wish you luck, because I don't think you believe in it.
Well, whatever it is, I'll keep it.
Yeah. No, I hope you stay on the path you're on. I hope you continue on like this. It's really an uplifting story. Congratulations.
Well, yeah, I have to continue because my kids want to kidnap me in 2040 to take me to the 1,000th anniversary of a brewery in Germany. So
2040.
Yeah, I'll be 87.
Jim, I don't have a ton of confidence I'm going to be alive in 2040.
Well, I told him, you do realize that's beyond my life expectancy.
Why don't we go earlier and you just tell me it's the anniversary?
Yeah.
Well, I hope to see pictures of your brewery trip.
Okay.
Put them on whatever magical thing exists in the future where we consider it the internet,
Right.
That's really something. It's so cool to talk to somebody who's kept up with things the way you have, and I am definitely calling your episode "Go with the Flow."
Okay.
That's what I figured out while we were talking.
Yeah. All right. Cool.
All right, man. Have a great day. Hold on for me for 1 second, okay? Of course, I want to thank Jim for coming on the show and sharing his story. And then I'd like to thank Touched by Type 1 and remind you to go to touchedbytype1.org, and thank AG1 and remind you to go to athleticgreens.com/juicebox. Of course, you can get 35% off your entire order at CozyEarth.com with offer code JUICEBOX and 10% off your first month of therapy at BetterHelp.com when you go to BetterHelp.com/JuiceBox. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. I'll be back very soon with another.